Look at this. Shooter Time just coming out hot. Of course, of all the shows we start 5 minutes late, it's the one where Shooter Time sends us a $25 tip. What are you going to do with your 12.50, Brian?
I don't know.
You know what we should do? We should enter at the end of the show. We'll enter a Millie Maker lineup together here on Shooter.
I could put it with the pile.
What's the pile?
Just a pile of money. Just throw it
That
on
you
the
sleep
pile.
on? Yeah. Where you just Scrooge McDuck into it every night?
Thanks, Shooter. What's that all about? He's just cool.
Shooter is cool. I haven't seen Shooter around much lately, but he's back with a vengeance. Hope you're doing well, Shooter. Wow, just Andrew just coming in hot. Brick, do you think Blender calling everyone stupid is GTO for his touting career?
I answered that in chat, actually.
What? Let me see.
The next one.
Yes, of course it is. It's good for his brand. I'm still upset though when I did his show for him last year, and I did a heightened version of Blender Stick, and then everyone was really mad when I did it. So they only like Blender's audience only likes it when he calls them idiots, not when someone else acting like Blender calls them idiots.
Well, I mean, if you go into a stream called was it Stupid Saturday, or
yeah,
what do you expect?
I wonder too. I need to ask Blender. I'm curious what his comment sections are like now that he moved it to Saturday afternoon. I bet it's like a little bit more tame. I bet he got some more insane stuff on Saturday evenings.
Looks like my channel's having some issues.
I believe I have it.
It's not you. You have it going. It just says YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming.
Maybe your channel has finally been deplatformed.
They probably could have deplatformed me on a few things.
Yeah, because you talk too much about dupes.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, if that was true, Peter, you would have been banned months ago.
Yes. It's funny because now I've been doing the Own the Moment, the Owners Club NFT DFS game. And I found myself talking about dupes with that format because, the whole pool basically, again, similarly has, available cards, and there's only 5 spots: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, defense. And my thesis is that dupes are a real issue that you need to avoid, especially when everyone just wants to play the best plays each week. It's like, oh, I can play Chiefs quarterback, Chiefs wide receiver, and I can play Carolina running back. And so I've been thinking through strategy, and I found myself mentioning dupes a lot in that context.
I still haven't checked that out yet. Yeah, I mean, especially when they're not thinking about it at all, it's probably a big edge. What's like first place get you?
First place, so they do have pretty flat payout structures, but first place is $2,000 and a seat to their live final in Miami at the end of the year. Yep. I don't know why I told you. I don't want you in there playing.
Oh. It's busy anyways.
Yeah, it's that's what's kind of fun about it is it's there's enough strategy element to it, but it's also pretty low maintenance. I spend 20-30 minutes on Sunday kind of messing around with my lineup combos. But that was another thing too. I was like, the temptation is like, oh, I have Rams defense. They're one of the best defenses. I'll put this in my whatever I perceive as my best lineup. But it's like, no, everyone else is going to be doing that as well. I think living in that kind of like mid to upper tier, but not like the elite tier, and then still focusing on correlation is probably the way to do it.
Yeah, probably. It depends on the amount of opponents and stuff.
Yeah, and I've been thinking about it too. I've been doing, I don't know if you've seen this format, but Underdog has these, they call them like the Royal Rumbles or whatever, and they're like 6-round drafts of the entire player pool available for Sunday. And, people get anchored to ADP, and there's positional requirements. And if you can just go slightly off the board past, there's how many people, 5 people, 6 rounds. So it's 60 players. Like, because those, 50 to 70th in ADP, those guys are going to get drafted almost all the time. But if you just push out a little bit more, I basically always try to get a guy like outside the top 90 ADP with my last pick.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like ADP would make no sense for any given Sunday.
Right. And that's what I think where the edge is just because people still want the comfort of the like ADP telling you this is an okay pick, even though like your correlation and like I was taking DJ Moore last week. His ADP wasn't even getting him drafted. I mean, he's a, top 15 wide receiver in the league. There's no reason that should be happening.
Yeah. It is honestly hard not to take that ADP into account when it's looking you right in the face.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think over, the full, 18 round drafts, I think there's, probably way better arguments to being more anchored to ADP, but in this, like a 5-man, 6-round thing, I think it gets a lot easier to get creative there.
So it's a snake draft, 4 opponents, 6 players on your team, 6 rounds.
Yeah. And so it's max 1 quarterback, max.
What's that take, like 15 minutes?
Yeah. Exactly. Maybe even a little quicker. Yep. Are your wheels already turning?
Yeah.
I would say I have just my formula down for how I play them, which is I get some kind of stack with a bring back. Ideally, I get a secondary correlation with, a running back, tight end, wide receiver, tight end. And then I try to get a player I don't think most of the field is drafting with my last pick. And I just run that on auto, pilot basically when I draft them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are fun. Let's see. We did get some questions in the chat tonight that we can get to, but how was your week 2 DFS week?
Not good at all.
No.
I got smoked. Got smoked like 3 days in a row.
Really?
Yeah, Monday night, baseball. Sunday was brutal. Oh, and I was considering golf too. I had Rahm. I kept Rahm in the lineup. You probably weren't paying attention, but he was questionable up until tee time, and no PGA source or beat reporter reported whether he was even at the facility or not.
Yeah, that is. I think I saw a bunch of tweets. I assume people were pretty tilted.
Yeah, I tweeted about it. I said,
okay.
I said I said if you want to get a job in DFS or sports betting or something, like become like an independent journalist.
Right.
Like I'm sure you could have somehow called the facility and talked to someone like, hey, do you see Rahm there? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
But people will pay for that information.
Well, that's what Levitan always says. He always is like, if I had an unlimited budget, he would want to hire, individual fantasy beat reporters for each team, because still, even though these guys kind of know that their bread is getting buttered from the gambling and fantasy audience, they still aren't fully catering their reporting to the exact stuff that fantasy people want.
No, not at all. And yeah, the guy I even made fun of him too on Twitter, the football guy's beat reporter who called the Philadelphia Police Department.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I would hire him. Hell, man, if he's doing that due diligence, I'm sure you could get him to call the Napa Valley Golf Course and figure out if Rahm's actually there.
Yeah, that's it is crazy now how just with how much information, how everything's documented, that some of this stuff can still slip through the cracks. Like it was week 1 where we had 2 crazy inactives with Trey Sermon and Zach Moss that just no one, like not an inkling anywhere that this was going to happen. Schefter, not even on it with the overnight bombs, just pretty crazy stuff.
I think it has to be independent too. Because I was thinking about this when I was younger, growing up in the steroid era of baseball. And then as I got older, and all the congressional hearings and all this. And it's like, thinking back as an adult, it's like, oh, none of these beat reporters knew that steroid use was rampant, right? Like none of the coaches, none of the owners, none of the GMs. It was all just one big secret that only Jose Canseco did it. And then he got a couple guys he convinced them, Rafael Palmeiro and Mark McGuire, to do it. But, why would the beat reporters know that this was rampant? It's like, I guarantee they all fucking knew. They all fucking knew. Or at least it's like I've never seen him do heroin, like in a rock and roll beat reporter, but I'm pretty sure he's on heroin. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
It's like, you guys all fucking knew. And then, but then they, nothing ever happens to them, and they just keep being the beat reporters now. It's like, fuck you guys. So, like, anyways, that's my point, is like, for the information that we want, like, they got to be independent. Because, okay, you're not going to get the Woj bombs. Like, you're not going to be everyone's best friend.
No.
But I don't really give a shit. You know what I mean? Like, that, to know that, Chris Paul signed a deal, 10 seconds before everyone else knows it. Like, there's no bearing on my gambling career. It kind of did when he released, like, picks before the draft and you can bet the live draft. But, like, besides that, none of that stuff really matters. So you're going to burn bridges, but you're going to find out if Ram is throwing up in the bathroom, if he's sick and he can't play. Like, you know what I mean? He's going to be pissed off that you released that he was throwing up. But
I think it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, because how they start to get their access in those inside reports is buddying up and having really good relationships with those guys, where if they're just this true outlaw independent journalist, they're probably not getting near as much access.
I don't know. Because, yeah, maybe you have to play the game to get inside the velvet ropes a little bit.
Yeah.
But, like, what are these access beat reporters? What are they giving us that we could, that's actionable gambling information? Like, starting lineups, like, that's just going to come out anyways. Like, they don't really give us anything anyways. So, like, and they have to protect their relationship, and it's a big cabal. You know what I mean? Like, they work for Comcast Sportsnet, and Comcast Sportsnet has a contract with the Pistons, and you're the beat reporter there, and you kind of work for everyone, and you don't want to piss off the players because you need them to do the post-game interview. So it's like, you can't really give us any good actionable stuff. And, like, I don't know, from what I've, like, read, like, the sports betting guys, like the Billy Walters and stuff like that, is they're talking to, like, clubhouse managers and you know what I mean? Or ticket holders, ex-girlfriends, shit like that. Like, it's like TMZ more than Hollywood Reporter. You know what I'm saying? So, like, I'm not sure. Maybe you play the game as long as you can to get inside the velvet rope, but, like, you could call the Philadelphia Police Department. You could call the clubhouse. You could, go into the pro shop, whatever, without being employed by the PGA.
Right. Yeah, it's funny too, because I think, like you said, there is different type of information. Some require probably a little bit more access. Like you said, like, sometimes it's maybe a coach has, like, leaked the game plan a little bit. He has which running back he wants to get more carries this week. Or there is the stuff like, hey, you just observed that Keenan Allen's hamstring looks incredibly ginger as you saw him walking through the tunnel, and he was basically limping. And it was, it's been a closed off practice and no one else saw that. Like, where your doggedness could maybe reward you in some cases, and in others, you might need more access.
Yeah. I mean, and, like, if you say the guy's more hurt than he really is, it could hurt his contract. Like, hey, man, I'm in my contract year. Like, I don't want him to know about this knee injury, that type of shit, where the assistant to the team doctor or something like that's like, no, this guy's not going to play Sunday. Or if he plays, he's going to be limited. Like, I'm surprised he's even playing. You know what I mean? Like, and then the coaches are going to just do coach speak during the press conference about the injuries. They're going to lie and mislead to try to trick the other coaches and stuff. So, yeah, I think you can and by the way, this is just, like, off the top of my head. I'm not a journalist. I don't know any. I'm not, experienced any of this, but someone who's creative and actually has maybe some journalist background, or I don't think you even need it, but if you did go to school for it, they could probably come up with a whole bunch of other ways to find sources and get good information. And then you charge $10 a month, and you'll easily get, if you're good, easily get, a yearly salary out of that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Yeah, I think there's definitely room for that. And it's also, I mean, in general, journalism like that is not a very glamorous job right now. The pay isn't great. It requires kind of insane hours and dedication. You do see some guy like Nick Underhill. I believe he used to cover the Saints for one of their big, publications there, and then he went out on his own and started his own Saints site. I think I don't even think he's doing Patreon. I think he has his own subscription service. But because he had a big enough following and he was kind of the voice of record for the Saints, I think it's been successful. So I think, and then he's clearly has good sources and stuff like that. But I think it's tough too. Like the Athletic kind of tried that, right? Where they kind of had a fantasy spin and they hired all these reporters, but it's just like from a financial standpoint, I don't know how viable it is.
I guess
fantasy Twitter. Are they kind of ponying up for this service, like a DAO that we all pay for together?
Yeah, I think gambling and fantasy Twitter, you could get, if you were good enough, if you were providing good information, because come on, like it's not worth, I don't know, even $50 a month. If this guy gives you one good, he knows Rahm isn't going to play, like that would be well worth it for anyone who plays PGA golf regularly.
Right.
And that's just one thing, and I mean, maybe not, but also too, it's like maybe the person just wants to get into gambling and sports and DFS and have a following, and he enjoys that, or she. So like, maybe they're not going to make $200,000 a year, but maybe they're like 30, and that's good enough, and they could do it, part time, or they have a job that gives them the flexibility. Who fuck knows? I don't know. I would like it.
Yeah. Andrew says here, awful industry to work in. Everyone's replaceable. I was a local market radio host. It's all clickbait. I think that's the other thing, right? Where the fantasy players and the gamblers, you would need to build up trust with them to where you wouldn't actually have to employ like total clickbait, right? Because no one wants to get, bamboozled. But on the other hand, you need those clicks or whatever to kind of support it. So you would need a full-on subscription model where people were paying you and then you were free from the shackles of clickbait.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, you need to be free from the sports and media, legacy media companies, to some extent. I mean, this is the way I'd like it to be anyways, is they'd be totally independent on some sort of subscription model, getting paid, who knows, Patreon, voluntarily, I don't know, whatever. And then, yeah, they don't have to play the game. Honestly, a TMZ model wasn't that bad. Like, if you know some tip, you call him, he'll give you $100.
Yeah.
Just be known as that guy getting tips, and you'll get people knocking on your DMs.
Yeah. It
probably
is
90% of them fake, but
right. And that's
was part of being a journalist.
There is I see these crop up a few times. There's either people within the fantasy space and they'll be like, my source, or even our buddy Crack Rock, who we've drafted fantasy teams with, he's hanging out in the Hamptons and, with, Robert Kraft and overheard something over there. And like, sometimes they have like this game of telephone vibe to them where like, maybe there was a nugget of truth, but by the time it gets to you, it's complete bullshit.
Yeah. Who knows what they can find out.
Yeah. Let's go to some of the questions we got in the Discord here. I think Corey asked an interesting question, and I know Corey also had been compiling kind of some data on ownership versus what it was projected and seeing if he could spot any trends. But he says, I'd love to hear more about the DFS review process. If there's anything to look for in terms of field trends, percentage of correlated lineups, ownership discrepancies, how people landed on the nuts, that can be used for decision-making going into the next week. And I think I was asking you a little bit about that as far as how much you're kind of adjusting your model to incorporate for maybe new meta dynamics in the game. How do you think about that as far as improving your process based on what's happened?
Trends, I'm probably not really like. I'm not really putting too much into it. All this stuff depends on specifics, like what are you talking about specifically. But looking at what other players are doing, I think is a pretty sharp way to go about it. Picking the guys you think are sharp and then looking through and seeing how they're differing from you. And you could try to do that in like a scientific way too, actually, and just compare what they're doing and week over week, and then see how it compares to the field or compares to what you're doing. I'd recommend it. I mean, especially if you don't have some like bottom up process here, we're just guessing, at a lot of this stuff. So
here's a thought experiment for you. Say after week 3, let's just say for some reason there was this crazy thing that happened, and every single tournament player started doing automatic double stacks with a bring back and a secondary correlation from another game. Like this was just 100% across tournaments. Would you be adjusting your model and sims? Would those be adjusting it on their own to combat? Like, I think that's kind of like illustrating an extreme to a trend. How would you account for that?
I talked about this I did Osmos on the contrary on Saturday, and talked about a situation like this that happened, I don't know, 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago at this point. It was Chipotle Attic won the Millie Maker, and he won like every site that week too, with a Chiefs double stack, double bring back. Alex Smith was the quarterback at the time, so whatever year that was. And immediately the next week or rest of the season, you saw a whole bunch of double stacks with double bringbacks because, one of the Burrito brothers did it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that can happen. I don't know if 4 years ago, people weren't as sharp as they are now.
No.
But it did actually kind of happen. And I wasn't as sharp back then either. I started looking into it. Yeah. I'm like, okay, what am I doing wrong here? Why don't I have enough quadruple stacks like Chipotle brothers? So yeah, if that actually happened, eventually I could figure out a way to take that into account. I probably wouldn't right away though.
You would let the trend really kind of firm up and make sure it wasn't noisy.
Yeah. So like stacks were known in 2016, but what percentage of the field was actually doing it? I don't remember. It was pretty low.
Yeah.
And now it's like, okay, 80% of the field does stacks or something. I don't know what it is, but it's high.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, now you got, okay, now 80% of the field does it. So however you want to adjust for it, then adjust for it. I don't think I would, if everyone just copied Chipotle next week, I don't think I'd be like, okay, let's give it a couple weeks.
Gotcha. Oh, I actually did mean to ask you about this from last week specifically because Andrew here's talking about the 4 p.m. and the pivot plays, and it was a huge late swap slate. Did you find yourself? You said you had a rough week. Were you behind enough where you were doing a ton of late swap? Were you already so contrarian with your 4 p.m. plays that you ended up just letting it ride, or how did that work out for you?
Yeah, I had a ton of Tampa Bay. And I had like a lot of 3 p.m. games anyways. So I didn't really, like the first half, I was like, yeah, whatever. I got most of my stuff coming at 3 p.m., but it wasn't nearly enough. And I had one Henry lineup.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of Cooper Kupp too.
So were you, I take it you were way under on that chalk Chargers Dallas game?
Yeah, I was under on that game. But I was over. No, I had a lot of the Chargers under on the Cowboys, so that didn't help. And I didn't have a ton of Kyler Murray. Henry.
Mm-hmm.
And that just ended your week basically for taking down a large field GPP.
So how did you end up on lots of chargers, but then not necessarily playing it like a shootout game stat kind of thing?
That's just what it told me. So I don't know why. Not a ton of chargers, a decent amount though.
Yeah. And so when
Yeah.
you say that you had a lot of charger not count, like I assume did you have like non bring back a lot of lineups that was like a charger stack and then no Dallas on the other side kind of thing?
Yeah, I don't know what the count was, but
Yeah.
there was both. Yeah. I mean, I had a little bit of Cooper. I don't like. I mean, I've said this over the years. Like, I think it's okay to be under on the chalk. Like, I don't think you have to completely fade it.
Yeah.
If you're already like way under and you're building all this by hand, then I would probably fade it. Like if I'm building by hand, a guy's 30% owned and I have him in 2%, you might want to just like get rid of that and then try to gamble on a couple other guys. But mine, if my 150th lineup has Amari Cooper in it, I'm just going to play it because that's probably the 150th best lineup with all these interactions taken into account.
Yeah. And so I think I've asked you this before, but how much are you utilizing late swap in your 150 set?
Not frequently enough. Yeah, a lot of guys are doing that a lot more this year, it feels like.
With your setup, are you rerunning a sim with as much results from the 1 p.m. as possible to look at that or no?
No, because I have a new setup this year, so it's not fully built out for that yet, but I plan on it.
Yeah. That seems tricky too. It's just like,
Yeah.
because there obviously the further along you get, there's more of an information advantage. Then you want to give that information to the sim, but then I'm sure it takes time to run. Then you still have to get the lineups uploaded. Then information might be changing, like a lineup you thought was dust. All of a sudden the guy goes off for a touchdown. Now that changes what the sim would spit out. That seems like a tough moving target.
Yeah, it's almost not even worth it. Like, I mean, if you could do it fast enough, you could do it like a few minutes right before. Lock could just roll with it. And if the guy scores, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the time in large field GPPs, we're talking large. That's mainly what I play, anyways. If you get a bagel, doesn't matter how many swaps you're making, you're not winning the fucking thing. But you can get some money back, so you should probably consider it. But yeah, it's just a lot of work.
It seems like a lot of work. Corey asking kind of the age-old question here of trying to understand if our process is right. Are we good? Are we a profitable player? How much do you get shook when you have a losing week to where you say, do I need to evaluate my process or do I need to trust it?
I'm actually retiring. This is my announcement. So I guess to be totally honest, at a certain point, you know what I do? At a certain point, if I'm running really bad, I just play less.
Yep.
And I'm always constantly like coming up with ideas and stuff like that anyways. So even if I run good, like I might have something new the next day. Even if I like win a GPP at baseball, I might have something new the next day, and I just roll with it. So and also I've been doing this for a long time, so I probably have more calluses built up than your average person. But no, I don't. That's why GTO like poker was such a good way to go about it too. Like in DFS, I feel the way I like to do it, instead of like all this narrative stuff and like downloading all the pods and then trying to figure it out by hand. When you have that process, it's like why do I care? Like, I know I'm just trying to figure out the GTO way and all the frequencies and balancing my hand ranges in poker. That's all I'm trying to get good at. It makes it easier to handle the swings to some extent, instead of like, oh my God, that guy bluffs me all the time. You know what I mean? Like I need to figure out he bluffs too much, and now so I'm going to call more often or something like that. You know?
Yeah. I feel like I know I've talked about this on shows where, last year I think I made good strides where I felt more confident in my process to where I didn't like tilt, I tilted in a micro sense specific things, but like I didn't tilt my process or think, oh, I need to start from scratch in the way that's how I used to think. Cause I was always chasing one thing. It was like, oh, I need to have the really low owned one off guy. And then the next week it was like, oh no, but this is the good chalk. I do need to continue to play good chalk. And it was like, I was chasing that trend. Like you said, the Chipotle bro trend of like, that's what he did. Okay. I need to do that. And I think if, as long as you can be confident in your process and you've hopefully shown some results, I think you can stay anchored to that and trust that there is so much variance. And if your goal, like I know I'm going about these tournaments, I'm trying to get first place in the SPY. I don't play cash games. I'm trying to build first place lineups, and I know that I can build good lineups and still not even sniff a top 10 all year. Like that's well within the range of outcomes and probably the most likely outcome.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's tough. I mean, but doing it that way that you just described, like, can't you see that driving you mad? You know what I mean? Like, oh, what is going on? What's the trends here? I need this one type of thing here. That's why I like doing it. One of the reasons I like doing it from the bottom up is like just let it all pick for me kind of thing, and then just roll with it. So like I don't care. Like people are like trying to put specific lineups, like I'll just random and throw it in there. You know what I mean? Like it all has a process. Don't get me wrong. I'm not like going insane here, but like it doesn't bother me that much if I put these ones into the 20 max and this other one into the slant, even though, let's say they're the same amount of players, opponents. Like yeah. I don't care. You know what I mean? Like, oh, okay, I would have won the slant, but I put it in the 20 max. Like you have no control over any of that stuff anyways. But I think a lot of this is just personality and experience too. Like it's just some people just get wrapped up over it. I got some questions in my
yeah, go for it.
In my YouTube. Fred says he saw Rom warming up 30 minutes before lock. Thanks for telling me now, Fred. Neil says, can you talk about how Run the Sims can help make me a better DFS player? Neil, are you is your pseudonym, is this a pseudonym for Justin?
Justin's over here doing he's a paid actor, clearly.
I'm on the fence about it. I've tried other projections. Peter, you want to answer that one?
Yeah, so what I've really been enjoying for Run the Sims is basically it's the closest that I can do to get toward Brian's process as a hand builder. Like I'm not smart enough to build my own Sims, and Justin has built a Sim that has a good track record. And what I was doing for these showdown slates and for the main slate is I'm pulling in aggregated ownership data from a few different sources, and I'm comparing that to the Sim results. And I'm using that as just a very simple screener of being like, this is what the field has become confident in. And this is what the math is saying is showing up over the course of 10,000 Sims for this slate. And that was extremely helpful to me on Sunday because it brought ideas that I hadn't even considered. And one thing too is like, you can get really anchored to things throughout the week. And one thing that popped up, like I didn't think both of the Colts wide receivers were going to go. It sounded like Pittman and Paris Campbell weren't going to go. I hadn't even considered them. Paris Campbell ends up being a scratch and Michael Pittman's active. I rerun the Sim and I see Michael Pittman as a top 5 guy that's popping with that new projection. And then I'm checking his ownership. The ownership isn't going to catch up in that 90 minutes in the way it would a running back. And all of a sudden I'm thinking, oh, I already love Darrell Henderson as a play in my lineups. Now I have this mini correlation that the math is telling me checks out and the field's not going to catch up to. So that's just one simple way of how I'm using it as kind of a screener to give me ideas, because I can't juggle everything in my head, and I'm not going to use the Sim to make all my lineups because I'm hand building, but it can point me in a really smart direction.
Good answer. So one more and a follow-up to the one before. Scott says, when you're running bad and you play less, how do you decide which contest to keep your action in? I play less of the like more expensive ones. Less overall, and then the first ones I'll start bringing back is the, like the $500 or more expensive ones. So I guess you could scale that to however you play. So if like let's say $50 is one of more expensive ones to you, then scale that one back and scale your whole amount back till you think you figure something out.
Here's another question from Campy here. Should you swap across the board the minute you dud a spot in the early games?
Why swap a guy who's low owned out and still in that lineup?
Right. And this is because I've been building my lineups pretty contrarian, like I barely did any swaps in my personal lineups because I already had Tampa Bay instead of the Chargers game. So I didn't have to, but I think to answer your question, if you'd built your lineup and you had CeeDee Lamb and Austin Eckler or whatever, all the chalk plays, like, yes, if you get buried early, like you do not want to go to battle against all the teams early who are way ahead of you and have those same guys.
Yeah, if you have 3 guys left and they're 25, 30, and 20% owned, you might want to switch that up if you got a dud in that early spot.
Right.
And whatever. I mean, all this depends on field size, but if you're trying to catch up and at least min cash or something, you could consider it. I feel like a little warning maybe is like if you got like 3% owned or 5% owned guys, like if you're confident in that lineup, like you don't have to switch, right? It's just like if you stack the Dallas game, that was the clear and obvious chalk, right? This past week.
Yeah, everyone was on that game.
Everyone's on that game. Okay, that's a pretty clear and obvious swap off. If you have like a 7% owned guy and then like a 5% owned, 4% owned quarterback with like a 15% owned wide receiver, it's like it's not. I don't know. Roll with it. If what you're doing is good, like maybe you can min cash still.
Well, and I don't know what exact kind of contests this person is playing, but if you're only playing a couple lineups, one of the benefits of the hand builder versus, Brian talking about having to rerun a sim on his 150 lineups is you can play out these scenarios ahead of time. You can say, if my early guys crush, I'm going to let it ride with my Amari and my Keenan. And if not, I know I like how this Arizona Vikings stack works. Like, you don't have to just be like, oh my God, now what do I do? What do I do? Like, the various scenarios. I think the hard part is when it's almost a tweener, right? Where you don't know, like, am I ahead? Am I good to let it ride? Or should I continue to push it contrarian?
I know how to answer that one.
Yeah.
Random.org. Type in 1 for yes, 2 for no. Run it 3 times.
Yeah.
Not once, not twice, thrice. And then let the DFS gods pick for you.
In my even easier way of doing that is, when in doubt, just go contrarian, because the payouts are so top heavy. And unless you're literally just like front running a tournament by 20 or 30 points and are protecting a lead, you probably need the contrarian points. It's just almost always the answer, I would guess.
I'd be fine with that. I'm just like let's be a little cautious here, guys. Like if you got a 4% owned guy with an 8% owned quarterback and like the run back is 7% and you have a dud, you don't have to switch that. Like if you got the Dallas stack, switch it. And then if you're somewhere in between, either do the contrarian thing or random.org. Like, but I doubt that matters like a ton, really, honestly. Like,
yeah.
And right? Like if your guy's 15%, 10, 12% own or something.
Well, and we were talking about this again, another kind of advantage of the hand build too, and playing contrarian is it's you get the information early. So if you eat chalk early, you're not actually getting that much new information, right? It's just like, well, me and the field are now moving on to our 6v6 in the 4 p.m. slate, where if you go contrarian early, not only are you getting the information on what the chalk teams are doing, but you're getting information on how your team is doing. And then you can really make an informed decision. And that's why I think this last slate set up so well to play the contrarian running backs early, fade the Najee, fade who was and because that information is just compounded in that case.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And if you're chalky early, well, the rest of your players should be, if you're playing a large field GPP, should be pretty contrarian anyways. So why would you fade, switch off of them? And here's another thing too, is the beginning of the season, there's generally more afternoon games. right? We had like 5 or 6 the first day, and 4 or 5 last time. It can be 2 sometimes, 2 or 3 a decent amount, unless that's different this year with I don't know, or since COVID. But yeah, I mean, like if you got 2 games left, there's not a lot you could do anyways.
Yeah,
on a full slate with all the ownership spread out.
Let's see. There were a few other questions that I think we got in the Discord. Do you have any others coming in on your chat, Brian?
Let me look. No.
Let's see. We have a question here from Conman, another kind of review question here. Although I think this is just what we were just discussing. How can one improve their process of playing fading chalk when it comes to players like Cup and Najee last week, or games like LAC Dallas? Should chalk be considered different in these situations? And I mean, I'll let Brick go, but just to double down on what we were just saying, I think when the game starts is a very interesting consideration. I'm more willing to consider chalk late because I have more information about my lineup than I am to just blindly eat it early.
And this seems like a pre-lock question, like just how do you handle chalk, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm not understanding the difference between Cup and Najee and games. Maybe he's talking about like the game stacking versus individual chalk, and should there be a difference there? Because there's a difference between playing Prescott and Cooper versus just a lone Cup.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I guess handling that stuff, I don't know. It's, I think the easiest way to think about it, and same thing with correlations, is ownership hurts you. The more ownership, the more it hurts you. Like you want 0% ownership, right? Now there'd be a reason the guy's 0% owned because he's probably not playing or he's trash. But you would love to have the best play at no ownership. I know that sounds obvious, but if you extrapolate that logically, it's like, okay, any amount of ownership hurts. It's just a little bit, right? So you want it to hurt a little bit less. And correlation helps. Any amount of correlation helps. So in a world of 100% parity, where like every play was the same, you would just jam all the correlation you could and not think about anything else besides ownership, leaving ownership aside, because every little bit of correlation helps you. The reason you don't do that is because of ownership, and because every bit of ownership hurts you, and the salaries and fantasy point projections are different. So because it's not 100% parity, the combinations of non-correlated lineups might actually be better. So it's really just because I don't know what to tell. This is kind of our last show, or maybe it was 2 ago, where we were talking about rationalizing this stuff. Is like use the game theory, use it best you can, but like you're guessing, because unless you have some sort of process, you're just like, okay, I know wide receiver and quarterback is good. Okay, how good? So try to answer those questions.
Yeah.
That's all I can tell you without, or just hand build and guess. Either one.
Henry or David, this is literally the opposite of what we're saying. We're saying the complete opposite. That it does not matter what kind of play is. If the field, Brian, if I told you this week, Derrick Henry, who looks awesome, is going to be 100% owned, he would be unplayable in your lineups, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
And so now now that we set that extreme, we're trying to find that line. Okay, he's going to be 50% owned. That means 50% of the time he needs to be in the winning optimal lineup for that to make sense.
I think he's trolling. You look at his next one.
Okay. It's hard to know because we get some genuine questions. I generally take people in good faith here.
That would be either this is his first week ever playing DFS and he somehow found this show, or he's been playing DFS for 10 years and he just knows Henry's chalk every week or just play him. Yeah. One or the other.
But I think if you're actually having that conversation in good faith, that's what's interesting, right? At what point are you sacrificing too many projected points to be unique?
That's perfect. Yes. And then another thing I say too is, okay, so take what Peter said. At what point? So we know 100's wrong, and we know zero's fantastic for Derrick Henry, anyways. So at what point do we play him versus not play him versus it's a go to random.org, doesn't matter. And then your process should be sometimes you're over and sometimes you're under. And I know that sounds simple as well compared to what I was saying earlier, but if you're always over on Derrick Henry, like David here, it's not, your process is almost certainly wrong. And if you're always under, your process is almost certainly wrong, because I could see this. Like I've talked, a bunch of guys, and like I've seen some guys process where they'll just have under. You know what I mean? Like I'm Mr. Contrarian, and like that might be better than no strategy, but like some weeks, good plays are good plays. Yep. And so you need some process to tell you that to answer that question that Pete was asking. We know 100's bad and zero's good. At what point do we go over under? And then your process should be sometimes over, under. It might be 75% one way, 25% the other way, but it shouldn't be 100 every week.
And I think, a point I've been making recently as I think through this stuff and push to be even more contrarian is sometimes on a showdown slate, when the sites haven't taken our suggestion to have an assistant to the regional captain, and there's only so many possible combinations, and some plays just stand out, generally the quarterbacks, as just incredible plays. You can go to FanDuel where it's even more pronounced because there's less spots and less creativity and options there with it, where you basically are having to sacrifice so many projected points just to be unique. Whereas on these main slates, when we're getting 13 games, I mean, often you're sacrificing like one projected point or even less in a ceiling projection to get a guy that's a fifth of the ownership. To me, it's not even close at that point.
Yeah. If it's like less than a point, that's the easiest way to do it. If they're the same, then whatever you have in your head, ownership, correlation, whatever you're thinking, that's your tiebreaker. Like, it's easy. Half a point, pretty damn close. Do it. A point's not nothing.
And generally, wouldn't you agree too? Like, there's a few different things that go into why some players get more ownership than others. If we use the example of like perfectly efficient ownership based on the projections, and obviously some of that is math based, like certain players are just going to pop in optimals way more than others. CEH, even though everyone's doubt on him, like at 4,800 this week, he's going to show up in a lot of optimals. Like he's going to catch some ownership, but a lot of it is just narrative driven. And it's like, who are the plays that the touts can tell better stories around than others? And it's a lot easier to build up a convincing case for Austin Eckler coming off of a 9-target game than it is for Jonathan Taylor, who got stuffed at the goal line 3 times. And yet you look at their ceiling projection this week and it's going to be pretty similar. And so then it's just like, okay, now you're paying a premium in ownership because one has a better narrative than the other.
Seattle, I bet will be one with Lockett and Metcalf, and their opposite starts here.
Yeah.
And then the narrative, either one goes off, right? Isn't that one that's been played? And you could even see it in the props too. Like the props will go up and down based on that kind of like recent bias. But yeah, the narratives matter too. Like that'll change ownership. If it's close, go with the game theory. If it's not close, like then you want to consider just taking the best plays, I guess, is like the simplest way to determine it. And I don't know what do you supposed to do with that? Like the narratives and stuff. Like what do you think? Like,
yeah, to me, it goes back to that whole concept of people want to feel comfort when they look at their lineup. They want their lineup to make them feel good, like they're making good decisions. One thing that really helps is if the field or big touts are giving their rubber stamp of approval on that play. It's like, I'm not doing anything crazy. Everyone agrees Cooper Kupp is a great play this week. But then you get into the question, what is your goals? Is your goal to get paid off when you are right? Because if that's your goal, then the entire field or half the field is getting the same similar payoff, and you guys are just moving on to the next 8 spots in your lineup.
Yeah, it's tough. I had a decent amount of Cooper Kupp, but that is a lot of lineups, especially in football, that you're going to pass up if that guy has a dud. That's another thing just to consider for people who don't play a lot of people who either way, if you play a lot of sports and DFS or just NFL, is the field sizes are way bigger unless you're like going through and picking out like 100 man every week on purpose or something. If you're playing the main guaranteed ones, they're like, I don't know, 10 times bigger than baseball, or I don't know. Baseball's tonight was 15,000 opponents. That's like nothing, right? Like I guess I can go look right now. But like I'm assuming. So yeah. So for Sunday, the $3 has 693,000 opponents. Right? You know, the millionaire, of course, has 265,000 opponents. The slant, this is like one of the most popular, you know, solid payout structures, 52,000 opponents. So you're what, 4 times bigger than baseball? So like if you win baseball once every 3 months or something, you know, now and you get to play every day in baseball. You know, that means you're going to win football's slant every decade. I don't know. Like somebody can do the math there. It's not hard, but like it's right. It's way more opponents and way less opportunities to play.
Yeah.
So you're going to look like a fool. You're going to look like a fool quite frequently. And it's football, and we're all gambling 10 times as much as we do in the other sports. So you're risking a lot more in a more uncertain environment versus a lot more opponents. So what do you think is going to happen?
Yep.
Just pray and get lucky.
Yeah, and some of these, I mean, we're talking pretty macro with this stuff as far as kind of game theory tournament stuff. But as Matt says here, I started doing slightly better than terrible when I started looking for smaller contests. And that could be like your play is not even changing, but your odds are literally getting better by being in a smaller field.
Yeah, like let's say you're even, there's no rake. In 100 man, you have 1 in 100 chance taking first. And in the $3, you have 1 in 699,000 chance of taking first.
Yeah.
What is the lottery? It's better than that, isn't it?
It probably is, at least for some kind of payout. Yeah. This is an interesting point, and I certainly get what he's saying here. Certainty and projections matters too. He's basically making the case that it's easier to project quarterbacks, and then the second easiest is running backs, and then third is wide receivers as far as volatility. My only thing is I don't find myself, just because it's easier to project quarterbacks, wanting to eat the chalk there. If anything, the band of performance for the entire lot of quarterbacks is more condensed than the other positions, where it's harder for someone to really separate from the field in a way that Devontae Adams can for wide receivers or Christian McCaffrey can for running backs. But how do you factor in positional variance at all with how contrarian you're being?
Yeah, it's baked in there. And I mean, I don't know. That seems kind of backwards to me. Like fading QBs is the original fade that people didn't know. Remember back in the day, quarterbacks would be 35% owned, 45% owned. And then eventually everyone realized, oh shit, quarterbacks don't matter that much. And they started dropping in ownership. And so once the ownership gets to an optimal level, compared to their salary and their points projection, this is my opinion. You know, Ricky D disagrees with me on Twitter. But I don't know. I had a tweet thread on a couple of them on this where we don't want the salaries to be perfect. We don't want DraftKings to have perfect salaries because then nothing matters. Like you could pick either side. It doesn't matter if it's perfect. So like if once ownership gets optimal, like quarterbacks are getting closer to it, like then it doesn't matter what side you pick because you have no edge there because it's at the perfect amount that it should be played.
Which is what we've talked about with sports betting, right? Where if you can find what do we call that? The hold is equal. Like
Vig?
if the VIG, yeah, where it's like offered 110 on both two different sites. And then because of that, you can basically flip a coin because the market has decided,
Right.
as opposed to if it's just one site where it's, minus 130 or whatever, you're betting into a bigger VIG.
Right. Yeah. So if your implied hold is 0%, then you can go on your gut or some inside information or whatever because you're flipping a coin and maybe you're right. Like you might not lose, but yeah, in DFS, I guess it's the same thing. It doesn't really matter what side you pick there, and if you have a now you can build structure, and like so the ownership doesn't matter, but I'm correlating, and other people aren't correlating, so I can get an edge that way. I'm not saying ownership's efficient; it's obviously not, right? And but it's getting better, and like in people's projected ownership isn't that inaccurate too, right? So I'm just saying if it were somehow perfect, it wouldn't matter what side you picked. If you're just looking at positional ownership and deciding fade or not fade. But you guys talk about, the Best Ball Bros talk about structure a lot. Mm-hmm. And so like, I think that is dead on, and more so in best ball, but obviously in every other sport, because best ball, like, you're not projecting whether who's starting this week with like a running back that just got traded.
You could probably use like the
Chubb, Nick Chubb. Was it Nick Chubb? And then they just traded Kareem Hunt. No, maybe that didn't happen. But anyways, let's just say that didn't happen. It was some fake tweet. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it. Yeah. Let's just say a backup got traded. Now you got a clear and obvious value play. It doesn't work like that in best ball a ton because it's ADP and it's a full season. It's not one game. So like, my point being is in like best ball, it's so random, right? And it's not like you can't get as specific each week that you should just be doing it all based on structure. Like within reason, obviously. Like you don't take 100 round early guy or something like that, or 100 spot. Right. But yeah, I mean it matters in DFS too, but definitely matters in best ball.
Right, because I think what you're saying is if ownership were perfectly efficient, like there's no way to get an edge in that thing. It's when you're exploiting market inefficiencies, and that's why we use the example of two guys have the exact same projection and one is more popular, say for narrative reasons, has higher ownership. That is an inefficiency, because if the ownership was efficient, they would be the same. They would be owned the same amount, and then there would be no way to exploit it. You could flip a coin and play whichever one you want, and then you just move on to the next way to get your edge, is what you're kind of saying with the correlation.
Let's, like, if you were looking at it in like a sim, like a run the sim thing, but just one position, and there's a 32% chance the guy is going to win, and he's 32% owned. And then the next guy is, 18% chance he's going to win, and he's 18% chance he's owned, right? Or forget about players. Just think of probability, like differently weighted coins or something like that, right? That are going to hit at 35% of the time. Well, then it doesn't matter if you go over or under on it. If we're just looking at one specific position, there's nothing you can do. You're just flipping coins and paying the vig.
Yep. We did it, guys. They've really gotten us talking DFS. I mean, normally we're way more distracted. I guess we had a tangent about fantasy beat reporters and at the start, but then we really dialed it in, Brian.
Yeah, well, we're getting some disappointment in your comment section there.
Oh yeah, what are they saying? Oh yeah, here we go. It's Wednesday, and there are no football games today. Disappointed in the lack of Illinois politics talk, gents. Well, you were literally the one who asked us about positional ownership a few minutes ago. So you were the one that sent us down this trajectory. If you guys are wanting to get your hands on Run the Sims, you can sign up for a free account. You can check out some of my shows to get a preview of the tools, and then you can use promo code Pete when you sign up. I do really think if you're playing any kind of meaningful volume, both Showdown and Main Slate, that it can really be the next best thing to being as smart as Brian and creating your own simulation. So if you have questions about it, you can ask me about it. I'd be happy to tell you more. And I think you can get a good idea from some of my screen shares on the tools there. Brian, anything else going on in your neck of the woods that you'd like to plug here?
I did have something I wanted to plug, and now I can't remember what it was. But
something with the app, that your Discord.
No, maybe I don't have anything to plug. I guess I'll just plug the regular stuff. So yeah, we got. Hopefully, I should have the props updated on my site for free, brick75.com. If anyone wants to tail some prop bets and get banned.
Oh, I just thought of something to plug, Brian. I got hoodies up in my store. I have a very clean white hoodie here. If you guys are interested in staying comfy in a nice white Lulz hoodie here.
I might have to pick one of those up.
Yeah,
weather just changed, man. Now all of a sudden it's rainy and cold.
Yeah, we'll get you a Lulz hoodie here. I might need to find a way to customize a jersey number on the back of it though for you. All right, guys, if you want to ever listen to this in audio format, we, of course, get those episodes up promptly on Wednesday evenings. Please subscribe to Brian and my channel if you have not. We will see you guys next Wednesday. Good luck in week 3.